Welcome to London. It's evening here. Obviously, it might be afternoon, morning, or the middle of the night for you lot. But anyway, you can probably see by now that I'm not on Alan this time round. This is our second of our live Q&As, and I thought that what I'd do is, because I'm on Alan tomorrow and the day after, and it doesn't seem that anyone ever tends to go on YouTube on Mondays and Tuesdays, it would be a good idea to do this today. And also because last time round we had a little bit of an issue with the questions getting buried, because when they came up on my screen on my phone, if I didn't answer them within about 2 or 3 seconds, they got buried, and that was a bit of a pain in the behind for everyone. So what I've got here is this that I'm talking to, but over there I've got a screen where I can scroll up and down questions. So it means that if you do ask a question, I should be able to scroll up and down and get to them all, so we don't end up missing them. In the background there, you can see that's actually where I film some of my arguably episodes, and I'm obviously brazenly promoting that other channel of mine where I talk about more sort of long form discussions about other things that aren't Alan and aren't necessarily Arctic. But anyway, here I am. This is my home, well, a small part of it anyway, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about Alan, what Alan's going to be doing, what I've been up to recently, anything Arctic related, equipment, communications, filming, any sort of stuff like that, anything related to my main originals channel. And then hopefully that will give you a sort of a bit of a window into some of the little details or the bits that I don't guess that you want to know about when I do the episodes. I also have a few questions written down here, which I've had emailed in or sent via DM from people who aren't able to watch this live, but do want to get their questions in. So here we are. If anyone wants to kick off with some questions, then you're more than welcome to. I should be able to see them come up on the screen there. But the one I thought I might actually just get sorted first, and I'm pretty sure that someone is going to ask, is what's going on with Alan's route next summer? Where are you going? What are you doing? What's the plan? Now, those of you who have looked at some of the earlier episodes will know that Alan was supposed to go to the Arctic Ocean via Canada, and of course being sea freighted across the Atlantic beforehand, and then driven across Canada on a low loader, on a truck, all the way to the Arctic Ocean. That was when I had a full set of funding. There was a documentary being filmed, and that was all before COVID happened. Now I'm in a very different situation in terms of the business side of things. I'm basically running this project solo now. And so instead of going in that direction, Alan does still need to get to the Arctic, because his purpose is to be essentially an insertion vehicle for getting me and a team to an area of sea ice. And so we're going to be heading next summer, probably early next summer, so I have time to do all of this. The plan is to start off from the Thames estuary, which is where Alan is based, then go all the way up the eastern coast of the UK, so all the way along England, bit of the majority of Scotland, and then the offshore islands, so the Orkneys and the Shetlands north of Scotland. And that's going to be quite useful, because it will mean I can pot into different marinas and harbours along the way, and if there are any teething issues, we can sort them out not too far off the coast. Then we have to do quite a big crossing across over to Norway, so not too far from Bergen, a little bit north of Bergen, and then again we will hop from harbour to marina all the way up the Norwegian coast, and I'm going to be picking up friends, dropping friends off along the way. I've got some mountaineers who I'll be dropping off to go and do some cool stuff in the fjords, and then when we get to the far north of Norway, I'll then hopefully be in a very small convoy of boats heading north from there up to the Arctic islands of Svalbard, and that is going to be Alan's sort of launching pad for a future expedition. Svalbard will become Alan's new home. Svalbard is a spectacular place. I'm sure some of you have read about it, seen some YouTube on it, and I've spent a couple of seasons up in Svalbard during the winter and spring. So that's going to be the plan. Next summer, Alan goes from the UK via Norway up to the Svalbard Islands, north of Norway. So that's that one question which I knew was going to be asked out the way quickly. Another question is, how am I? I'm always absolutely fine, always even happier if I'm communicating with my obstreperous YouTube crowd, so thank you for that. Do I have another winter trip planned this winter? That was written down there as well, excellent. Yes, I do. Last winter round, I was working with a guy called James Redden, and we were up in the far north of Alaska, trying to do a long ski journey, which is kind of my bread and butter. That's what I do. That's the core of my work. We had quite a lot of bad luck. We had quite a bad bout of COVID. I didn't have particularly bad symptoms, but poor James was really smashed a bit by that, and took a while to get rid of a really hacking cough. And ultimately, with a combination of that and bad sledging conditions, we just thought, we're going to compromise the trip so much now. Let's cut our losses this season, come back a season after and give it a good crack. And luckily, because I don't have another expedition planned for this winter coming up, it was a good one. I can simply move to the next year. So yes, same team, same plan, a slightly improved system, hopefully. I mean, you're always trying to improve on everything from your sledging system to nutrition to route finding, all that sort of stuff. You always want to try and get better from one season to the next. So we'll be starting that, I think, at the beginning of February, which is about a week later than we were due to start last time round. And we hope to be off the ice after about 6 weeks. If we can be a little bit faster, then that would be ideal. So the North Slope of Alaska. Next question. Any updates on audiobooks? I know loads of people asking me whether my books are available on Audible or any of those other sorts of Audible apps. The problem with that is that, well, initially, all but one of my books were published quite a while ago now, and the enthusiasm for retrospectively recording audiobooks is quite low. Publishers, whether it's republished with another publisher or with another small publisher, financially it often doesn't make a lot of sense to do that so far after the event. And my most recent book, which was the original edition, came out in 2018. I just haven't got an agreement for that to happen yet. I know that's frustrating, and I could just plonk it through some kind of software that reads out the words and then just upload the file, but I wouldn't want to do that. To give you an idea, when I'm recording the voiceovers for videos, whether they're 10 minutes long or half an hour long, that's quite a significant period of time. Believe it or not, I don't get my diction perfect first time around every single time, as you just noticed. And so sometimes I have to try sentences again, I have to try paragraphs again. And so an entire book takes a very, very, very long time to record. And I just have so many plates spinning at the moment with different projects, I don't really have time. I think those people who are very keen on audiobooks will have probably heard a load of them read out by the great Stephen Fry, who has the most wonderful sort of speaking tone on, and he did all the Harry Potter books and narrates a load of others. But unfortunately, I think he's beyond my budget, so I can't ask him to do that for me. Unfortunately, that's not on the horizon soon. I don't actually have another book due out soon either, but the next time I do, I promise I will push hard for it to be done as an audiobook as well. How am I going to get Alan back after the trip? That's a very good question. The original plan, he was going to essentially be left alone on the Arctic Ocean with 2 trackers on, one on the bow and one on the stern, to make sure that they stayed together and we could be sure that Alan was still in one piece. And actually the plan was to salvage Alan from the North Atlantic the season after. Now there's always going to be a risk associated with that, but that was the option that we had, because we were going to be drifting across the ocean and then abandoning the boat to launch a ski journey. I'm more likely now to run a journey whereby we have 2 crews. We have an ice crew and a boat crew, and we then get dropped off. And so we can then go and do what we need to go and do on the sea ice, on the Arctic Ocean, and then actually the boat can loop back, maybe can launch some scientists and go and do some work somewhere else. Maybe we can share the work, and then it will then come round, Alan will then come round and pick us up, we hope, from a finishing spot. And because we've all got trackers everywhere, everyone will know where everyone else is. So the plan is, after the next big trip, Alan will be ready to simply go on to the next one and the next one and the next one. So a multi-use boat and not single use. Will there be an Alan 2.0 or any other sort of project vehicle? I've been playing around with loads of different locomotive ideas, whether that's 8-wheeler buggies that go over ice, amphibious vehicles. I've been coming up with all sorts of ideas over the years, but the thing is, although I come from a professional engineering family, I am not a professional engineer, so everything I get is either in the blood, I suppose, or sort of handed down, and so I have to do an awful lot of asking of questions before I do that sort of stuff. I'm not a design engineer, and so if I was going to build something from scratch, I would have to outsource a huge amount of the work. And as you probably noticed, I like to do a lot of things myself so that I understand systems best. So I think at the moment, Alan 1.0 is a reasonable project for me to get stuck into. Next question, what happens if you get out icebound and squeezed by the ice? Will Alan pop out onto the ice? That's exactly the plan, and that's one of the main reasons why I bought Alan, because there are all sorts of different hull shapes, of course, and some of them are pretty sharp. And if you have a very deep hull or quite a square hull, the danger is if you get pressure ice on both sides of the boat, you will get squeezed. And if you're not lucky, instead of being popped out onto the ice as you hope that you would, you might simply be crushed. And no matter how strong your boat is, whether it's made of aluminium or whether it's steel or whether it's glass fiber, every boat's going to have a limit. And actually having an intelligently shaped hull is the way to avoid getting crushed, like Shackleton's Endurance and countless other wooden exploration boats particularly in the 1800s, when people were doing a lot of exploration up in the far north. So although Alan isn't designed exactly like the Fram, which was the great repurposed Norwegian ship, which a lot of explorers used to go both to the Arctic and the Antarctic, which had this rounded hull, Alan's hull is not too far off, and I'm slightly concerned about the rudder assembly and the prop assembly, about whether that's vulnerable to ice. We had a number of different tactics, actually. So instead of just waiting for the ice to do its thing, we did have a plan before to actively either roll the boat onto the ice and then put it, and then support with bags full of snow either side to keep Alan upright, or actually to reinforce the keel and drag the boat onto an ice floe that we wanted to use. So taking control of the situation. So that's to be confirmed. But yes, Alan's hull is likely to be as good as a non-ice designed boat can be in ice. Of course, there are boats that are designed specifically for use in ice, and I'm never going to quite have that kind of perfection. Have I ever considered a new edit of my Snow Dogs movie? I'd like to see a new try and a new title of the movie. I super like that one. Well, thank you. I put together the new video of me spending time with friends up in the far north of Greenland, running 20 dogs, 2 dog teams. And we were there for the whole winter, the whole spring, and a little bit of the summer. And the last edit I did, that was actually a second edit. Originally, when I first came back, I put together this long montage, which didn't really have a narrative or a story or a voiceover. And I wasn't really happy with that in the end. So actually, the one that I did, was it last year or was it this year? The one that I did most recently, anyhow, all these months seem to roll into the next. I sort of considered that might have been my best and final effort. So if you didn't like the narration or the story on that one, then I'm very sorry. I'll have to do another expedition and make another movie for you. Will I be doing content on my mountaineering experiences, Mont Blanc and Greenland? I'm not really a mountaineer. I know that people often get a bit confused about whether polar people, polar travelers, polar skiers, polar unemployed people, whatever you want to call us, and mountaineers, there's a lot shared, and a lot of people do a bit of one and a bit of the other, but I'm not a mountaineer. And although when I was young and I was training and I was at university and the years after, I did spend some time in the Alps with mountaineers, I'm not a professional. And so I don't really see that as being something which I feel in a position to make movies out of, because it would essentially be it would be an amateur operation. There are people out there making fantastic mountaineering movies. Of Greenland, yes, I've had 3 or 4 experiences in Greenland that I haven't cut together into films yet. They haven't been big epic journeys. Some have been just for filming and more cultural things. Some have been A to B, trying to get somewhere without dying, so a normal journey. Yes, there are a few which I can cut together, but I do have a bit of a backlog, and I really am trying to edit together episodes both of Alan's stuff and Arctic stuff as fast as I possibly can. They aren't that quick, because you may have noticed my style of edit isn't that I just film myself with a static camera for 20 minutes and put royalty-free music in the background. I cut quite heavily, and so the time that it takes to put the whole thing together and then work out the narration, the VO, that sort of thing, that does take time. They're not quick episodes to put together, even the 5 or 6 minute ones. Make sure I don't miss any out. Would a short mini cruise around some UK harbours or ports raise awareness of funds? Yeah, so that's exactly what we're going to be doing. I've actually put out a message on the community board that next year, when I, in the early summer, start to move Alan up the coast, I'm going to warn you lot where I'm going to be. I'm not sure if that's going to be a good or a bad idea, but I'm going to put out a schedule of large towns along the coastline where people, you know, can come and meet us and can come and see Alan, and that I suppose, along with a well-planned social media campaign, might be able to generate a little bit of interest. I'm not at this stage going for big corporate sponsorship, because I have a number of irons in the fire for that for future polar expeditions, and what I don't want to do is waste relationships that I have that might be able to raise serious cash for serious big expeditions on something which I can just about manage to do with the support of this channel and people who are helping me out sort of directly. Like Shackleton and his tractors. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the early explorers, whether they were British, whether they were Norwegian, whether they were Russian or indigenous people of the North, they all came up with different types of technology, different contraptions, different ways that they were trying to get around. And yeah, a lot of them didn't really work. In particular, Captain Scott had a lot of issues trying to use very early motor vehicles, and they just didn't work out. They didn't manage many miles at all. So yes, there are quite a few similarities to how both ships, vehicles, tractors, all that sort of thing, they sometimes work, they sometimes don't. We just have to do our very best. Yes, someone has noticed that my map is out of date. I have a map of the Arctic Ocean, which I think was as far as we knew about things in I think about the mid 1500s, and so there are large tracts of Greenland either made up or completely missing. So I kind of like that map because it reminds me that it wasn't that long ago that we really didn't know anything at all. So we're quite lucky to have all these satellite maps when I navigate these days. What will be my main food provision during the journey, and what treats do I like to bring along? Treats, I like anything that tastes of fruit, because normally a lot of the food that we have to eat is quite fat and carbohydrate based, so anything that reminds me of something fresh is quite nice. But my main provisions, they're very different on the ice to how they are on a boat. On a boat, you can cook a little bit more coherently. We have the Reflex stove, which is going in soon, so we can actually cook on a pan. I also have these little 12-volt heaters, which just heat up preheated meals as well. So you can be a little bit more relaxed on a boat. I'm sure those of you who are sailors will know that you can actually do some pretty good cooking on board. But we'll have a basis, of rice and pasta, and we'll make various things around that, maybe a bit of fishing and that sort of thing. On an expedition when I'm really in the middle of nowhere and weight, every single gram really matters, it's of course a different matter. And so I use freeze-dried food, which I'm more and more making my own freeze-dried food concoctions these days, because first of all, the ones on the market are really expensive and often aren't perfectly matched in terms of portion size for what I want, or maybe I don't really like the taste. So I'm trying to do more and more, developing my own stuff. And then I've actually done an episode not too long ago, which was a flapjack recipe, which is the key of my day food. So when I don't have a stove and I'm just eating cold food during the day, I eat these slightly sweet oatmeal snacks, which have different flavors in. And there is an episode on me designing what I thought was the ultimate flapjack recipe, which you might want to have a look at. Otherwise, nuts, bit of chocolate. I really like white chocolate, stuff like that. Anything that doesn't contain any water, because when you're on the ice, any water that you're hauling along with you, of course, is dead weight, because surrounding you is snow and ice. You might as well use that instead of hauling it along in your packets. So everything is as dry as possible. Do I have a timeline for Alan's expedition, and am I putting him back in the water soon? Right, so I've already said, you probably weren't here when I said this at the beginning, so Alan will be going on the water early next summer, and we'll be heading up towards the Arctic next year. For being the launch vehicle for the actual expedition, that's the bit where I do need to get full corporate funding for the next big expedition, and I'm getting into that round of conversations with companies at the moment to try and raise all the funds and get a documentary set up again. So that first move is set in stone. The second move, the actual ski expedition, I need to confirm that, work out exactly who's going to be on the team, all the little details that go around it. It's moving up quickly. I'll make sure I didn't miss out the second half of that question. Am I putting him back in the water soon? No. So he came up the River Thames last November, and basically we got to the point where I pretty much understand now the things that need to be done to the boat, and I need to do quite a lot of work to the cooling system over the next few months. And so I was considering putting Alan in the water this autumn, but really it would just be burning money for no reason. We've got to get the turbo back in, the new exhaust fitted. There's a lot of stuff to do, and then there's a lot of electrics to do as well. So I'm afraid I'm going to dedicate this autumn and winter to doing other parts of Alan. Plus, I'm going to be out the country twice. I'm going to be in the US, which I'm going to talk to you about right at the end, and that's going to be possibly an opportunity for some of you. Then back in Alaska for an expedition in February. So if I'm going to be ready by next summer, I need to really focus on the important jobs. Yes, lots of people like the map. You're absolutely right. I'm looking for more questions. There are some excellent comments, but I'm looking for some questions. Do I catch fish to eat? Alan is slow enough that I think most fish would probably outpace Alan. I'm not an expert fisherman, but I see no reason at all why, particularly when we do a little bit of work to the stern. In fact, that's a question I have here, which I'll tackle in a second because that links on. I can't see a reason why, if we're traveling at 5 or 6 knots, we shouldn't be able to do some fishing off the back. I'm sure there are some excellent fish in the North Sea that don't mind becoming dinner. But also, there was a question here about, am I planning to do anything to either the bow or the stern of Alan? To the bow, a little bit. I might be putting a pulpit on the front so that there's at least a railing to grab onto it on the bow, but I'm not going to be extending the bow. I'm 90% sure I am going to extend the stern so that people can stand more comfortably and more safely and with a railing around them on the stern so that we can get in and out of the water and do all sorts of things. Just have a bit more space, also a bit more storage space. So yes, that will be a plan, and that could be on that stern platform. I won't let you in on my plan of how it's going to be constructed yet, but that would be a good spot, I suppose, for an expert fisher person to do some fishing. That isn't me. The only fishing I've really done of any serious sort has been up in the high Arctic, and I was taught by Inouye of northern Greenland how to make holes in the ice and then to drop long lines down, often hundreds of meters long, with dozens and dozens of hooks on, and then you go to sleep, you disappear off, you leave it down there with bait on all the hooks, and then you come back maybe the next day, and often we had 20 or 30 big halibut, beautiful fish, all on the line. So the smaller ones went straight to the dogs, and then we kept the big ones for supper. So that was really my only serious fishing, and it's not really a technique I can use from the back of Alan, sadly. Okay. Yeah. So sponsors for Alan. That's quite a big question. So was it March or April? April 2020, when the whole COVID thing really kicked off, we were at the point of having all of the decals, all of the branding stuff was all being made up for our big sponsors. We had Adidas on board, we had Gore-Tex, we had these massive, fantastic sponsors on board. And even after COVID basically meant that we couldn't launch because all the borders closed, they were fantastic, but it turned out that they couldn't stick by us for the next year because, first of all, we didn't have any guarantee that COVID was going to go away anytime soon, and they needed to reallocate all their resources. And so we had all of that sponsor adorning all planned and ready to go. In fact, we were in talks with one other sponsor about painting Alan a different colour because it was their company colour and they were willing to pay for that. So yes, at some point Alan will start getting a little bit merched up in company colours, but I'm okay with that. I don't see it as sort of gratuitous because I'm very, very careful, first of all, with the companies that I work with, and I always make sure that I have a proper relationship with them, like an R&D relationship where I'm interested in the products that they make, and I actually go to the factories, I get involved, and they make things for us, we feed back information to them, and so I don't feel bad when it looks like it's a bit of a sellout, putting a big sponsor logo on the side of a boat. Really, it's the only way that these sorts of things can happen. So not quite yet, but my hope is that with some negotiations and some meetings over the next few months / year, I might be able to get that going. Next question. Oh, we've got something about Starlink. Yes, so Starlink's a funny one, and of course Elon Musk, who I suppose is the figurehead of that technology, is prioritizing certain parts of the world for putting more and more stations and more what would you call relays in place. And the Arctic isn't a particularly high priority at the moment because simply of the number of people who need it there. And those who work right up to the North Pole or right down to the South Pole already have the opportunity to use the Iridium system. And Iridium came out, it was a bit late because I think one of the rockets that had all their satellites on exploded, but they managed to get them all up there. And they launched their L-band Certus service, which is the high bandwidth service. And that works really well in the Arctic and Antarctic. It is expensive. But it means that most people who work in very high latitudes are kind of covered for communications at the moment, as long as they've got lots and lots of cash. Starlink is a lot more efficient and a lot lighter weight. So at some point I'd love to be able to use Starlink, but particularly with the Ukraine crisis, and I think that they're really focusing production of units and also density of relays to other parts of the world apart from the Arctic. So yes, but not yet. I'll do a couple from here whilst having some more messages coming in. There was a question here that says, will Alan have cabins? The original answer to that was going to be definitely no. It was going to be completely open from bow to stern within, because we were a 3-person team, and frankly, if you're used to living in a tent with someone for months and months and months, you don't worry about privacy really. There was an argument to be made for separating an area off that was warmer than one area, so that you have like a cold area where you can work on things that need to be either refrigerated or just kept a bit cooler than the living area, and then maybe behind a thermal curtain we could have an area where we slept and ate and that sort of thing. That was a question mark. I'm now looking to formalize that idea in something a bit more solid. So there's a region, and of course if I was on the boat I'd be able to show you this. There's a point at which, just forward of where the electronics panel is, where I would say the rear of the boat really separates from the front. It's about where the racking begins, and it's where most of the more comfortable seating is. And what I might do is, because it would join on to where the battery box is, I might put a segregation all the way across there, and that in particular will mean that I can keep one area at one temperature and one at another. And also, if we do have more people on board, say we have 6 or 7 people on board, and we have people, there won't be bunks, but if we have slatted sleeping areas, we can sleep maybe 3 or 4 people at the same time. It would be nice if they could be away from the noise of people talking, and certainly the noise of the engine. And the engine itself needs to have a big thermal blanket, an acoustic blanket put over it anyhow. But if we can try and do that, I think that would be quite helpful, so that people can exactly, so people can do shifts of traveling when we're traveling 24 hours a day. So people who are on night shift or on day shift. So yes, the original plan wasn't to have cabins, and there still won't be proper, as you would expect on a sailing yacht to have cabins, but certainly something of a delineator between the rear driving work section and the front living section. That's going to be part of the plan. Oh, hello, that was Paul. Hello, Paul, who chose Wonderman. That was your excellent addition. Well done, thank you. Adrian, for how long will the first Alan mission be? Transatlantic crossing later. And hello from Mexico. I've been to Mexico. I was in Mexico when I was 19, and it was a wonderful trip. I very much enjoyed Mexico. Anyway, back onto your question. What would be the first Alan mission? So there's going to be the 2 phases. The first one is going to be to get Alan to the Arctic. So that's going to be next summer, up the eastern coast of the UK, up all the way up the west coast of Norway, and then up across a fairly significant sea crossing up to the Norwegian it's a treaty-run organisation there, but Svalbard is officially part of Norway. So up to the Svalbard Islands, and that will be phase 1, and then onwards from there to the Arctic Ocean, either the season or another season later. That's going to be the plan. Transatlantic, no. Alan, I'm designing Alan, and I'm modifying Alan so we can do offshore passages. And I know that some people who are pretty down on the idea of these lifeboats anyhow, that gives them the heebie-jeebies. This is not the sort of boat that I want to go to sea for prolonged periods on, when we can expect to have weather systems blowing through over weeks and maybe even months. That's just not what we're going to be dealing with. And also, we can't travel fast enough. So when we do ocean passages or prolonged periods of time, so we're talking 3, 4, 5 days at sea, that's going to be pretty much our maximum, with the exception of being on the Arctic Ocean. And the Arctic Ocean is a kind of a different beast, which I'll explain in a second. So we're going to be doing those chunks of open sea with good weather forecasting and being pretty damn cautious. Also, if we can, travelling in a small convoy of boats. So that'll be travelling from the Shetland Islands to Norway, and then from Norway to Bear Island, and from Bear Island to Svalbard. When you're on the Arctic Ocean itself and around all the sea ice, things really change, because the ice sitting on the ocean really attenuates wave height. So even if you've got a bit of a hoolie, even if you've got some serious wind coming through, you're not going to get the huge big waves and the big swells that you'd otherwise get on open sea. Now, there are sailors, I'm sure, in the comments who understand this stuff far better than I do, but we're going to try and limit ice-free large sea passages as much as we possibly can. So picking our moments and trying to do them at good times of year, potentially with friends nearby, so we can help them, they can help us. No super chat. I wanted to give you more money. Wow, that would have been wonderful. To be honest, this is my second live thing, and I'm just happy right now that I can see all these questions and I'm not missing them all. So we're going to go for small mercies at the moment. I don't even know how to switch on Super Chat. I'll try and do that next time round. Thank you for wanting to send me more money, because I won't lie, the next month or two on Alan's going to be really, really expensive. So I really appreciate that. Based on my experience, do I think Alan will make it? Is it realistic? Well, I've not been on a long extended sea passage with Alan, so the answer is I can't give you a definitive answer on that. These boats are designed to keep people alive, a lot of people alive, not in any particular comfort, for at least a day. That is what they are designed to do. They are designed to be strong, and this one is particularly well made because of the hull design and the manufacturer. So it's a particularly good example of one of these totally enclosed lifeboats. And so in terms of the boat breaking, falling in half, sinking, the engine dying, these things are pretty unlikely. It has an excellent engine. They are famous for their reliability, and it's in very good condition. So I don't have any concerns about the fundamentals of the boat lasting a day, a week, 2 weeks on the water. But there are so many unknowns, of course, that I can't give you a definite answer on that. We need to be very careful about controlling fire risk, because really the only thing that could really lay waste to Alan is fire, because even if you cut Alan down the middle, because he's so buoyant, both halves would float. So that would mean at least we would have something to hold on to as well as a life raft whilst awaiting some form of assistance. But a fire is something that we need to be very, very careful about. And so I do have plans to make sure that that is absolutely minimized. When we were talking about the propulsion system, and people were very casual about saying, oh, you can have 50 or 60 litres of gasoline on board. That's the sort of thing that really gives me the shudders, and I want to avoid having anything really apart from diesel or a very small amount of stove fuel on board the boat. Do I think it's realistic? Yes, the passages that I'm planning I think are utterly realistic, because they are taking things in bite-sized chunks all the way up to Svalbard, and then, as I said, the game sort of changes a bit when you're on icy seas. Being a lifeboat, Alan, is basically unsinkable. Yeah, that was more of a comment than a question. Yeah, social media will become more important. Do you think I'll be available on Journey during the internet? To give you a bit of context, when I did my first really big polar expedition, I was just out of university. I was 21. There's the video, The Long Haul, which I published a few weeks ago about that. And at the time, we had an Iridium satellite phone, but we were limited to literally sending an SMS every few days. And the opportunity to do anything really with social media was pretty much nil. This was only 2 years after Twitter was first invented. This was in the early days of social media, only a few years after Facebook had matured into a global product, rather than just something that students mucked about on. And so I've gone through the whole process of doing more and more and more and more social. And one of the nice things about being out there in the middle of nowhere on the ice is actually that I can have less screen time than I do when I'm working here and doing all sorts of things. So I do quite like the idea of not having to constantly update social. But I understand that I have a responsibility both to people who care about what we're doing, and that's everything from my friends and my family to people who put time into watching my progress and who give advice and all sorts of other things. So I have a responsibility to communicate, and more than just update my location every day, because of course we have a tracker that always updates our location. But in terms of uploading live images and footage and that sort of thing, I'll try. What I'd like to do, certainly from Alan, is do far more high bandwidth internet work. So that would mean giving you guys video pretty much as we're on the move, and Iridium at the moment is the main method via which we can do that. On sledging journeys, when every single gram, every ounce really matters, that's tougher. And the only ones at the moment that give you serious ability to upload video is this Certus service, and that's like the unit itself is well over a kilo. That's a lot of weight for something which is basically a luxury, and it's also thousands and thousands of pounds. So yes, I'm watching the technology like a hawk, and the second that we get something a bit lighter, I will be able to do more elaborate social media work, even when I'm on a very lightweight expedition. That would be a really nice thing to be able to do. And of course, it's something that's demanded by those who I'm communicating on behalf of. So say I'm working with a company who are designing the next the next generation of extreme outdoor clothing that's then going to trickle down through to general outdoor wear, hiking wear, people playing sport outdoor. They expect a great deal from us, quite rightly, and so I do have a responsibility to stay on top of that, and I will do so. Alan rolls in a big storm. Are you ready? Please don't pitch pole. I have a friend, in fact, I have a few friends who have rowed oceans, and I think some of you will be aware of this sort of mini industry where people row across normally the Atlantic. A few people have rowed across bits of the Pacific and bits of the Indian Ocean, and some of these boats are only 15, 20 foot long. You know, some of them are really, really small. Some are a bit bigger, but you know, these are very small boats. And one particular friend of mine, she was at university with me. She was pitch poled in a storm, solo, well off the coast of Japan on the Pacific, and she had to be rescued. Thank God she was okay. Her boat was remarkably well designed and actually survived, and I think was washed up on a beach somewhere long after that. And they found the boat. But yeah, I mean, obviously that's a serious thing. I was saying a bit earlier about whether Alan is ready for sea passages, and the answer is picking your moment and doing short passages will be key. Because if you go out on the ice, if you go out on the water for weeks or months, you have to expect new weather systems to blow through, and you've got to deal with them as they come. And weather forecasting, of course, becomes less and less reliable. So this is going to be a lot of biding our time and choosing the right moment to make it. Yes, Alan does roll even in a bit of wind, let alone in a storm. And I have a plan for reducing Alan's rolling. My initial tactic was to go ballast, and I have put some ballast in, and that is a significant improvement. And I was actually planning an idea where I would significantly beef up the keel, and in doing so add a great deal of weight in that area there. But there's a difference between stability and comfort, I've been told by the experts. And actually, what we might be looking to do instead is go back to that concept of bilge keels. Now, bilge keels are very susceptible to ice, so these would need to be detachable. And I have a design. I've been working with people who understand more about this than I do, who really who've done the calculations to work out the length and the width and all the different types of forces that we would need to be able to withstand. But we do now have a working idea of what might be able to be attached to Alan's hull to support basically an anti-roll system whilst offshore. But then if you want to beach the boat, or if you want to drag up onto the ice, they can be detached. Or if you want to slink along very, very shallow water and not have anything touch the bottom, you can take them off there as well. So that's part of the plan. But yes, we understand Telb lifeboats roll. That's one of their characteristics. But the beauty of them, unlike a boat with a deep keel, is that they won't be torn to shreds by pack ice the first time they encounter it. When I got Alan documented, were there any issues with the boat originally designed for limited use rather than being a boat that was built to last? Yeah, okay. So I think the question there is really asking, these boats are designed for 24 hours of survival at sea when a ship has sunk or an oil rig is on fire, and you've got 60 plus people in there. They're all covered in oil. They're scared. People are being sick all over the place. You know, I think the idea for which these boats were originally designed is a pretty hellish reality, and thankfully, you know, they haven't been needed to be used too often, particularly in recent years. But yes, repurposing a vehicle that's designed for one thing for another is a consideration. But you've got to look at the fundamentals. What's the hull made of? How well is the hull made? What shape is the hull? What's the engine? How well has the engine been installed? What is the gearbox ratio? What sort of thrust have we got for a given number of revs? There are all sorts of things. If you forget about the identity of what Alan originally was, and you work out what raw ingredients do we have, that's when you decide whether it's a good idea or a bad idea to update, convert, repurpose, renovate a boat like this. And that's a judgment call that I made a while back. It's also true that if I wanted to make the perfect Arctic expedition boat, whether it was powered by wind or powered by engine or electrical, all sorts of different things like that, yes, you would build a different boat. But if you looked at Skip Novak's new 77-foot yacht, you know, we're talking about millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I do not have access to that sort of a cash. And so sometimes you've got to make a decision, particularly in my industry, of are we going to do nothing, or are we going to work hard and build something that works? I did my first expedition with deeply substandard equipment, which I didn't even modify because I didn't know I even had to modify it at the time. On the long haul, we could have done that, I reckon, 10 days quicker and in a great deal more comfort if I had known what I knew now. And that was because I simply didn't have the knowledge of modification or what things matter and what things don't matter when we launched. And so, yeah, Alan wasn't designed initially and specifically to support Arctic expeditions, but I'm confident that with the updates that we're making to the boat, he'll be able to do it. Next question, about electric propulsion. Yeah, so there were lots of different ways of possibly sending Alan electric. And one of the first ideas that we had was to completely convert the boat from diesel engine power to electric, and basically have a diesel electric system where we have a set of generators that charge up huge capacity batteries, which then feed power to the engine. And that was, it's a possibility. In fact, a few weeks ago I visited a fantastic team down in Southampton who are designing remarkable electric power systems for small and medium-sized boats, and we were looking at the sort of technology that might be applicable to Alan in the future. The plan isn't going to be workable at the moment, I think, for the short term and the medium term, particularly for the journey next year and the first expedition I want Alan to launch me on, because of the efficiency of the diesel engine being pretty damn good. I know obviously there are losses through the drivetrain, but the density of diesel is fantastic, and sending that power via batteries and via inverters and all sorts of things, you keep on losing 5% here, 10% there, another 5% there, and also it's a huge job to completely swap out the power system, and then you've still got a problem of redundancy. So no, we're going to stick with the main 24-volt system, which is a combination of series and parallel. So we have multiple banks of 24 volts, which we can rig into a 48-volt system via a different wiring plan if we do need to run this idea that I have of multiple deployable smaller motors on the rear. Paul, you were calling them trolling motors. Yeah, so that sort of thing, but a little bit more beefy, because trolling motors tend to be, pretty diddy. And the idea that someone had in the comment section a couple of days ago was fantastic, and that was about the idea of having a mount on the bow whereby I could use one of those motors, maybe when it's not being used in an emergency, to be used as a little bow thruster on the bow if we're trying to navigate through a tricky area. So that's a really good idea. What are the chances of making it into the history books? Well, hopefully positive history rather than utter disaster. I don't know. The expedition that I want to do on the Arctic Ocean is very significant. I don't go after small things. And for that reason, I've had over the years some really big disappointments. I've not gone after expeditions which are nice and easy. And for that reason, a few times they've not even launched. A few times they've failed in the first few days because of either weather conditions or an injured teammate or various things like that. So you never quite know what's going to happen. But what I can promise you is the expeditions that I take on are never small, because what's the point of trying something that you know is well within anyone's grasp? We're trying to see what's possible here and what technological and other scientific innovations we might be able to contribute along the way. Could I reinstall the davits on Alan and hitch a ride on a commercial ship? I'm afraid the davit release mechanisms are long since melted down for scrap now. We don't have those anymore. They were just these giant hunks of galvanized steel. No, I don't think that we can hitch a ride on the side of a ship, although that's kind of a cool idea. And I also don't suspect that many ships would have a spare davit where they can pick up stragglers and shoot us along at 15 knots. The only person I know, the person I was referring to earlier, who I won't name because it's, it was a difficult moment for her when she was rescued off the Japanese coast, quite a way off into the Pacific. The Japanese Coast Guard said, it's you. We're not picking your boat up as well, and the boat was simply cast adrift. And so I don't think many ships, particularly in an emergency, would be willing. I don't think they would give a damn about the future of Alan or how sentimental you are about your boat. If they're there to assist you in an emergency, they want to get the human beings off the boat and then, job done. So no, I don't think that we can hitch a ride on the side of a large ship. Sorry, there's kind of long questions. I need to make sure that there is a question at the end of them. Documentation. This is a question about filming and the electrical side of things. I do actually have quite a lot to do this autumn in terms of electrics, computer. I think some of you would have seen on the community page, Alan doesn't have a brain plugged in yet, but Alan now has a brain, which is actually sat over there, a small mini PC that's going to power navigation, camera systems, all that sort of thing. And so, yes, there will also need to be storage because we will be filming huge amounts of footage for documentaries, for YouTube, for all sorts of things. Now, what I've got better at over the years is actually being pickier about what I shoot. Years ago, I would just almost constantly have a camera either clicking with stills or filming stuff. And of course, then the poor editor, which at the moment is me, has to then deal with just reams and reams of useless stuff. So I'm a lot pickier now about what I film. So, and storage these days is cheap. So if we're shooting really good quality 4K storage at high bit rate, yeah, I don't see a problem with storing terabytes and terabytes and terabytes with backups on board the boat. And probably the option is there. I suspect at the moment the option is not there to upload important footage to the cloud, as it were, because the only method we would have at the moment is Iridium Certus, and the cost of uploading 10, 15 gigabytes, let alone terabytes, is just far too expensive. So there'd have to be like a backup system on board, whereby you have hard drives up one end of the boat and maybe backup SD cards up the end of the boat. So if we had to abandon Alan, someone would grab the little packet of SD cards maybe just to make sure that we have some record of our trip. Anyway, these are all emergency end of the world scenarios we're thinking about right now. Have I got a spare prop yet? No. Actually, I was talking to the guys in Southampton about props, and I was getting some advice about that. There was an idea of actually changing Alan's prop to a higher thrust prop, because we were thinking the engine running within its sweet spot at the maximum speed of around 5.5, 6 knots. It would be better for fuel economy, but actually we were finding that we were running at that cruising speed at such low revs that if we end up running even lower revs, and obviously the gearbox is part of this conversation too, and there was a possibility of changing the gearbox, but again, I've decided against that. If we were to have an even higher thrust prop and we're able to run the engine at cruising speed at even lower revs, you're actually coming out of the sweet spot of the engine and the diesel burn becomes inefficient. So I don't want to run the engine, and also diesel engines don't like being run at just over idle. So no, I think that prop's fine. We might possibly get a very similar stainless steel one made up. Whether that then becomes the primary one or the backup is a decision for later. But the prop's in great condition, and it runs really nicely. It's got plenty of thrust. I'm not too worried about the propeller at the moment. It's only a three blade, but it seems pretty solid. And it's only been in the water for probably just over a week cumulatively over its entire life. I mean, the boat's not been in the water very long overall since it was made in 2007. Are there any politics involved in such a trip? Do any governments need to know about this? This is something which I deal with a huge amount. In my career, I'm very, very much involved in the theory and the policies behind insurance. I've got a video and arguably coming out on insurance later this year about search and rescue, about government responsibility, about expedition responsibility, about the responsibility of insurance, and basically not putting people in danger, doing the wrong thing, or costing people vast amounts of money. And once you're offshore, of course, once you're outside of territorial waters, 12 nautical miles in most cases, you're then into exclusive economic zones, which is another matter. But then there are obviously high seas, and a large area of the Arctic Ocean are accepted by most countries to be high seas. And in that situation, you're looking at what are known as the MRCC, so the Marine Rescue Coordination Centres. And lots of countries around the Arctic have different tranches of the Arctic, all the way down to where the land is and to the North Pole itself, where they have an international obligation to assist people in difficulty within their zone. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole Russia thing for obvious reasons, but we're planning, I think, to go around that side of the ocean. The original plan was to go around the Canadian, Alaskan side. And at the moment, there's no guarantee whatsoever that the Russians would stand by their international obligations to rescue anyone, let alone a British flagged vessel. And so basically there's a huge question mark there, and I need to make decisions based on what happens next year, what happens the season after, as to what the right thing to do is. But the wider question of search and rescue, coast guards and that sort of thing, yes, you tell everyone that needs to know where you're going. You have a good home-based team that can coordinate and communicate with people, and obviously have all your beacons and trackers set up correctly. But there's a point at which you just have to go and get on with it and make sure that you have a financial plan in place. So I'm talking about insurance or rescue membership, whereby you then don't offload the financial responsibility of what is essentially my private project onto a government's coast guard, where normally they don't charge a fee. And there are situations where people have had multi-million-pound search and rescues essentially written off by governments, and that's paid for by a taxpayer somewhere, and that's something you can't just sweep under the carpet. I don't intend for that to be the case, because I have a lot of redundancies in place, and short of freak accidents, we want to try and minimise the chance of messing up. Let's have a quick sip of this. Right. Oh, there we are. Any defence from polar bears? Yes. So whenever I'm in polar bear territory, whether I'm camping or whether I'm on a boat or anywhere where polar bears might be hanging around, you have a whole range of deterrents, a whole range of things you can do to keep them at bay. And counter to what some people think, all the bears aren't desperately out there hunting humans trying to eat everyone. A lot of bears will simply sniff you from a distance, get a sense of what you are. If they're reasonably well fed, they'll just wander off. They're just curious. Some will come a bit closer and try and work out what you are, but it's relatively unusual that a bear will make a beeline for you and simply attack you or jump through your tent wall during the night. Otherwise, it would just be complete chaos with everyone who works in the Arctic. So you have a whole load of things which try and keep the bears alive, basically. So to begin with, yelling, banging pots and pans together, just making noise to make the bear aware that you are not an obvious prey item, and that you are something which it might just not bother itself with. You can go beyond that, and you can fire little mini bangers, little mini bear bangers, which are, I guess you call them little mini fireworks, little flashbangs, that either fire from a little pen launcher or from a shotgun, and they can land in front of the bear. They go bang, they flash, they scare the bear away. You hope they don't scare the bear towards you, and then you can hopefully both walk away safe. Ultimately, when I'm in bear territory, I also carry firearms, because if a bear is either very ill or starving and desperate, and it simply goes straight into an attack mode, you have to defend yourself and your team. That's luckily something I've never had to do. Do I have a way to change anchors if things go bad without going on top? So the anchor at the bow should be deployable from staying within the bow hatch, because the bow is so narrow that you can actually lean right the way over, and you can easily clip on so that you don't accidentally fall over the bow. So you can deploy the anchor without being fully outside the boat. We'll also have a sea anchor or a drogue or both. There are various ideas that I'm coming up with right now, possibly even a stern mounted anchor, because I know the Scandinavians are quite keen on that. So TBC. I need to talk to proper sailor friends of mine to come up with a plan for that. There are two icebreakers that cruise to the North Pole. Yeah, there are. There was in Russian, I think it's 50 years of victory, translated into Russian, is one of the nuclear icebreakers that go up there. But the cabins that people book on these ships that go up in the summer are, tens of thousands of dollars, and you have you're like ensuite bathroom and all that sort of thing. And then they go and dance around the North Pole in the warmest time of year, and then they go home again. I've never quite understood the value of that, to be honest with you. But yeah, there are nuclear icebreakers that do head to the North Pole when the ice is at its thinnest. A few of these are comments, not questions. Also, just slightly conscious of time. We've been going for nearly an hour now. I have longevity, I have stamina, but the question is, do you guys as well? These are all comments. Kind of answered the one about how far do I plan to go. I'll slightly expand on that. How far do I plan to go in the Arctic with Alan? So Alan's plan really, I think now, different to what the original plan was, is to be a drop-off. And so there will be a crew that stays on board Alan and either brings Alan back to Svalbard or back to Norway or wherever, and then comes and picks us up maybe from wherever we end up. So Alan will probably end up right back at the beginning of where he starts his sort of mini phase 2. I also have an idea that it would be really nice to take Alan down south at some point, but really the concept needs to be proven to begin with. Some of the seas down south, I'm sure some of you are aware, are a little bit grumpier than some of the seas you get up north, even given how nasty the Barents Sea can be. So because around the Antarctic, of course, you get winds which simply have nothing in their way. They just go round and round and round. They pick up speed and they pick up power, and so it can be off the scale nasty down there. But there are opportunities, possibilities. Someone's just jumped in there with the Northwest Passage. Yeah, there's little exploring to be done with that, and there are all sorts of people who have now sailed the Northwest Passage. So I'm not really doing anything groundbreaking there. For my career, I need to do new things, and so taking Alan through the Northwest Passage will be great fun. By no means easy, but great fun, but not anything particularly new, so it's not on the top of my list of priorities. I've just answered the one about the Antarctic without even seeing the question. Well done, me. And then, will we have real-time telemetry? Not telemetry in terms of live fuel consumption, live revs, that sort of thing, because I guess we probably could if we wanted to rig up some form of tachometer system that then goes through a computer. But our location is the main thing, and there will be multiple trackers on board Alan with their independent long-term power systems that aren't reliant on the main battery bank. And that means that if we or Alan has a problem, the outside world, so our UK-based support team, will be able to track exactly what's going on in real time. Hello, great channel. Thank you. That's the sort of comment that I absolutely endorse. Do I plan on taking dogs? Nope. Dogs, you can't just take dogs to Svalbard, and that's going to be our sort of halfway point, without huge amounts of paperwork. In fact, someone on their boat did bring some dogs to Svalbard a few years ago. He was stopped by the governors, whether it was their boat or their helicopter. He was stopped. He was then not arrested, but basically brought in under caution, massively fined, and loads of other things. So you cannot do that. Also, there's no space for dogs on board. Alan, even a pet dog. I used to have a pet dog, and even for one pet dog on board Alan, it's very difficult to exercise them if you're on the water for more than a day or two. And although my dog used to love swimming, you know, I don't think it's good for anyone really. And my expedition is going to be human powered, the next one. So no, if I'm going to work with dogs, it will be through a completely different sort of project. Northwest Passage, that is, as I just said, definitely something I'd like to try and do. How many hours a day do I think about Alan? Yeah, the funny thing is, when I bought Alan off my previous company, which was the expedition team company that we had put together, and Alan became my problem, I was thinking, you know, I might have to mothball this for a bit because I have other priorities. I need to get another expedition sorted out, because remember, first and foremost, I'm an expedition leader on ice. I'm not a professional sailor, and some of you may have noticed that. So this is a tangent for me to be going along. But then I think the momentum of, first of all, this channel and you lot all really getting behind it, because you know the first video is now well over 1 million views, which blows my mind considering how badly edited it was, and I mucked up all the sound on it as well. But yeah, it's become a bigger and bigger thing, and because of the timing in 2020, all of my speaking work, I make my bread and butter from standing on stage and speaking to people, and all of that more or less shut down. I had a few Zoom jobs, but otherwise that whole thing really stopped. And so I had a great deal more time, as I'm sure lots of us did who had sort of gigging careers, self-employed careers. Suddenly we had more time. and I spent more and more time on the boat. And I guess it's just become part of my life. I do limit the number of hours that I edit and the number of days a week that I work on the boat, because otherwise it will take over, and that will genuinely start to impact my career, which I do need to keep on a serious forward path as well, because the last couple of years have really knocked back my plans and my ambitions. So I need to keep my eye on the other stuff as well. But yeah, I do spend quite a lot of time, if I'm on the bus or on the train, thinking through design problems or investigating what material to use. And yeah, Alan takes up a disproportionate amount of my headspace. It's true. You probably guessed that. Do I think that Alan will make it to a museum one day, like the Paul Museum? So that's the Spree Museum in Cambridge. I think that's down to me, isn't it? It's not really down to Alan. I mean, Alan has already earned all the plaudits that the world can give. It's whether I manage to embark Alan upon an expedition that is novel, interesting, original, useful, innovative, and therefore has a legacy. So that is down to me. Whether Alan ends up on a scrap heap or in a pride of place in a museum, that's down to how hard my team and I work. There are no more questions there. These are now just very, very, very kind comments. We have literally just hit an hour, so I am probably going to call it a day at that point. I don't see any questions there. I'm going to finish up with a bit of a reveal before you all disappear off, and also just mention something about America. So first of all, I am this autumn, as well as a lot of the structural stuff that I need to do on Alan around the engine as well, and those bilge keels and all sorts of things like that. The electrics are going to start going in. So I'm talking about devices, and very, very kindly, there were some really awesome people in this, in Alan's army, I guess you'd call it, who have helped me get hold of an AIS unit. So this is not just a receiver, this is a transducer. This is the Raymarine AIS 650, which is it's one hell of a unit, so that's going to be installed. And also one of my Wonderment members, and I really do appreciate those of you who have become members. I don't offer you guys very much in return, but it really does make a big difference. I was also bought an excellent standard Horizon radio, so that's going to be installed again and all linked together to Alan's brain over the coming months. So that's kind of cool. That was my mini reveal. The other thing I do want to quickly talk about when we before we finish up is, as well as my expedition in Alaska next February, March, hopefully not into April. If it's into April, then we've skied too slowly. Then I'm actually going to be there in, not in Alaska, in the lower 48, in December time. And I'm going to be on the East Coast. So at the moment, confirmed for Boston and DC, Chicago, part of the Midwest, I think Omaha, possibly as far as Salt Lake City. And I'm going to be doing a bit of a loop of speaking jobs. So basically a mini speaking tour. And so my itinerary is not yet fixed. So if any of you are involved in events of any sort for businesses, universities, organizations of any sort, and you're interested in anything related to what I do, then I will be in the US in December. And I might be able to, if you send me an email via my website, we could wangle some kind of a plan together and make that happen. So those of you who are in the US, and I know that actually the bulk of my audience is in the US, that might be a cool opportunity. So mostly the Eastern Coast, but I will be zooming on a loop through the Midwest as well. So that could be a really nice thing to do. It'd be kind of cool to meet some of you, not all of you. I'd like to meet some of you though. Anyway, on that, I don't think there were any more questions, were there? Oh, there are a couple more. I'll do these final two before I stop. How many people will be on board, Alan, and how big is my support team so far? Support teams kind of come and go. Normally I have a team of about 3 or 4 working in the UK when we're away doing liaison and that sort of stuff. But when you have sponsors, you also have a link into their team as well. So actually, in reality, you maybe have a couple of dozen people linked to the project. How many people on board, Alan? An expedition team is normally 3 or 4, but if we have a skipper and a crew just for Alan as well, that might increase up to 6, 7, or even 8 people. I think beyond that, it would become pretty cramped and uncomfortable. And what is the estimated cost of Alan? I presume that's not a joke related to the fact that I'm not going to tell you what I paid for Alan, and that was starting from the very first video. I'm still not going to tell you exactly what I paid for Alan, because the guy who I bought Alan off, that's his business, and I don't want to basically tell you commercially sensitive stuff so that he then can't do deals with other people selling boats down the line. Because if someone says, oh, Alex paid this for this boat, why am I paying that for that boat? I just want to keep that between him and me. It was a significant chunk of cash because we were paying a premium for, I think, the boat that was in best condition and was the best build. But in terms of spend, including including funds that we had invested from the expedition, which had the company and proper funding coming in, I think we probably spent something in excess of £15,000 sterling. But very, very little of that has been labour, because we've done most of the labour ourselves, and a lot of it is actually technical equipment that's currently still sat in boxes that you haven't seen yet. So yeah, that is in excess of the price that I paid for Alan. Anyway, I said I was going to go. I've done another 4 minutes. Thank you, everyone. There were good questions. There weren't any which were too overly abusive, which was a shame. Right. Bye.